What's going on? The beginning of your presentation sets the tone for the entire show. And in this video, I'm going to show you some of the pitfalls that I see a lot of presenters make that keep them from having those incredible deliveries. And I'm going to show you 4 better strategies plus a bonus that you can use to capture your audience from the get-go and crush that presentation, so that way people are raving about you and they cannot wait to work with you at the highest level possible. Let's jump in. It's Dr. Delatorro. So first thing we have to do, if we want to have a better opening to our presentation, we got to start our presentations with story. One of the greatest ways you can open a presentation is going right into story. Not a, ladies and gentlemen, this is my name and this is what I do and these are my credentials and this is why I'm so important, but just jump straight into a story. I remember the first day of 6th grade, I met my first teacher. Her name was Miss Diane Williams. And Miss Diane Williams changed my life on the first day of the 6th grade because she walked into a room full of all at-risk children and she said, "You're not a youth at risk, you're a youth at promise." And she immediately began to relabel my life. Now, how many of you in this room have ever had a favorite teacher before? Hands way up. Yeah, Miss D was my favorite teacher. You see how I started my presentation with story? I started with a story. I didn't go into my name and who I am and what I'm about. The first thing I started with was story. And here's my point to you. If you want to take it to the next level, begin your next presentation and start it with a story. It could be a funny story. It could be an emotional story. It could be a life lesson story. Does that make sense? Right? Les Brown taught us this. Distract, dispute, and inspire. Distract them from their existing reality long enough to have them dispute their own limiting beliefs about themselves enough to inspire them to take different action. Does that make sense? That's the power of a story. So we want to make sure that we start with story if we want to take our presentations to the next level. Second thing that you want to do is start with a great quote. Audiences love quotations and one-liners and things that they can share on social media, right? So what if you started your presentation by saying this: the 2 most important days of our life is the day that we're born and the day that we figure out why. So in this presentation, I'm going to share with you 3 ways to figure out why you were put on this planet so that you can live your purpose to the fullest and get paid to do what you love. Who's down with that? Hands up, say I. You see how I started the presentation with a powerful quote, right? And then I enrolled the audience who's up for that by raising my hand to get them to do the same thing I'm doing. But I started with a quote. I said the quote twice and I said, this is how the quote applies to my presentation. Does that make sense? So you can start with a great quote, right? For example, you could come on stage and say, the greatest nation in the world is our imagination. Ladies and gentlemen, when was the last time we really used our imagination to create the future we desire, right? You could walk on stage and say this: Helen Keller said that a person who does not read is no better than a person who cannot read. Right? So if you don't read, and if you're not reading on a regular basis, and most studies tell us that the average American after college barely reads 1 book a year, but the average CEO, C-suite executive, successful entrepreneur, millionaire in America is reading 1 book a month. My friend, readers are leaders. You see how I started with the quote about reading from Helen Keller, and then I shifted it over to a startling statistic about how we read and the impact of reading on our careers? You see how we start a presentation? So you can start with a great quote. So if you love quotes, build quotes into your presentations, and it gets audiences loving what you're saying right off the bat, and it gets them sharing it on social media right off the bat, and it gets them writing it down, and you get that ooh and ah effect, right off the bat. Ooh, what did she say? Oh my God, that was good. What did he say? I want to share that. Does that make sense? It creates that sharing energy, that excited energy right off Jump Street. Hey, I hope you're enjoying this video. Listen, if you know that you need to deliver strong sales presentations in order to explode your revenue, you better go ahead and register right now for our brand new online course. It's called Crush Your Sales. It's powerful, persuasive presentation skills for sales professionals and entrepreneurs. Cannot wait to work with you. Third thing that you can do if you want to open your next presentation is much better, is start with facts and statistics. Now, what's interesting is I just kind of did number 3 in number 2. But what if you started your presentation, you walk out on stage and you say, ladies and gentlemen, currently 50% of the people that get married end up calling it quits and they get divorced. Of the 50% that's left, 40% of that 50% that's left is actually miserable and unhappy in their relationships. So what does that really tell us? Only 10%, that's 1 in 10 couples, or 10 out of 100 couples today are really thriving in their marriage and in their relationship. So in this presentation, I want to share with you 5 things that you can do to immediately infuse passion, romance, excitement, enthusiasm, and joy into your relationship so that you can love what you do and love who you do what you do with, because that's what life's really all about. You see what I just did there? You see how I started with a startling fact or a statistic. Then I developed it and said, these are the 5 things I'm getting ready to teach you in this presentation. Boom, 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 which all speak to the startling statistic that I gave them in the beginning. The whole reason why I started with a fact or a statistic is to shock the audience. Does that make sense? You want to, I'm not saying like electrocute them, but you want to shock the audience off rip. And a startling statistic or an interesting fact does that. Masterful stuff, all right? So you can start with stories, start with quotes, start with facts and statistics. Another thing you can start with, ladies and gentlemen, imagine that you're graduating from Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida, getting ready to walk across the stage with your master's degree, and off in the distance you see your old roommate from freshman year. And ladies and gentlemen, imagine for me, if you will, that old roommate is at the same graduation ceremony that you are. You're graduating with your master's with a 4.0 and a degree and a job at a major corporation. You see your roommate from freshman year and he's graduating with a bachelor's degree, $100,000 in student loan debt, and no certain future with a company or organization. And it makes you ask yourself, okay, how did this happen? We're at the same graduation ceremony. We started at the same time, at the same school, but we had two completely different outcomes. My friend, is it possible that two people can go to the same conference and get two completely different things out of it? Can two people read the same book and get completely different lessons out of it? Can two people drive the same vehicle and have completely different driving experiences? The answer is absolutely, positively yes. And why does this happen, ladies and gentlemen? It happens because at the end of the day, we have to understand we have the power to not only experience things, but to interpret our experience. Two different people can have the same experience and have two different outcomes from said experience based upon our implementation and execution of the things that we learn from said experience. Ladies and gentlemen, imagine, if you will. Does that make sense? So you can have them imagine anything, because the brain loves to go on trips. It just does. And I'm not talking about mushrooms. I'm just saying, the brain loves to go on different trips. So take your audience on a ride as you give them content, especially at the beginning of your presentation, and it's gonna make a massive difference. Bonus, bonus, bonus. Oh, I love this one. This is gonna put a lot of money in your pocket right here. My friend, one of the coolest things you can do, especially if you wanna sell a whole lot better at the end of your presentation, is start with questions. Ladies and gentlemen, how many of you in here would love to learn how to leverage public speaking and presentation to 10x your annual income? Hands up. Say yes. Yes. Now, ladies and gentlemen, once you learn that skill, how many of you all are ready to step it up to the next level in your public speaking and presentation and get 30 to 40 gigs every single year, almost guaranteed? That's what our system will teach you how to do. Who's up for that? Say, oh yeah. So look what I just did. I asked two what's called enrolling questions. I'm enrolling the audience into the outcome I want for them, and the presentation is just starting. Does that make sense? So you can ask, how many of you all see the value in photography or wellness? Or how many of y'all see the value in supplements or holistic eating or eating from the ground? Or how many of y'all see the benefit or the value in parenting from school or charter schools or whatever your subject matter is? Does that make sense? But you start off by asking them two questions. One question that helps them understand the value of your presentation to them. And the second question says, okay, once you learn this, are you ready to take action on it? And that second question pre-frames them for what you're gonna offer them later on in the presentation, whether it's a book, an online course, a retreat, a mastermind, doesn't matter. A vacation, doesn't matter, whatever it is. Does that make sense? My friend, if we start with these openers, oh my gosh, it's gonna be gangster bananas for your next presentation. Can't wait to see you in the next video. Dr. Delatorro, I'm out.